I will call to order the meeting of, it's the 27th, right? 27th or 28th, I know that, of October. Trustees of trust funds, and first item of agenda on the agenda is the approval of the last meeting, minutes of the last meeting. I'll entertain a motion to do so.
So moved.
A comment,
Yes.
if I may, on the minutes?
First you have to second it, and then
Second.
Okay.
Thank
Now,
you.
comments or corrections?
I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but I think, I don't know if I can put my finger on it here. It's something about the art. It said the trustees thought it would be a good use of the funds.
Okay.
I don't want to come across like we're passing judgment on what's appropriate or inappropriate for the use.
Okay.
So
Do you want me to reword that?
Maybe just something like the trustees thought it would be an acceptable or appropriate application for the use of the funds.
That would be, it's the second page last.
Yeah, I've got it.
Yep, okay.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah,
All
thanks.
right. Okay, that makes sense. Anything else? Hearing none, I'll call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
I'll send out corrected.
Thank you, Judy.
Yep.
All right. So, on the scholarships, I thought I might see, or we might see Susan Morrell this morning, but apparently she's not going to make it. I did reach out to find the status so I could report on it this morning. I first heard back from Susan, and she said that Kathleen was still handling that in her retirement. So I reached out to Kathleen, and it took a while because she's traveling around Spain. So, but she did get back to me, and her comment was that when they sent the drafts to the AG's office for signatures, the AG's office decided that they wanted another statutory reference in it. And so she circulated signature pages again with that change, and she assumes they'll come back to Susan. So I've reached out to her and asked her to update me on it. But hopefully, and this is true of the community scholarships as well as the Mortimer ones. Hopefully we'll have it all done by January, when we're supposed to vote on how much money we're distributing, right? That's January. So, and on the McHale, you saw the emails from Kathleen saying that Ms. McHale decided that she would handle the selection process for this last
For the
year.
last time.
And then after that, the fund will be fully expended. Okay. You want to sign checks quickly before
Yes.
TD votes come in?
Yep, I have 5 scholarship checks for signature. Just give me 5 to you.
These scholarships,
All 5, yep.
University of Miami. Ooh, that's a good one. Worcester State, huh?
Worcester State? I've never heard of that. Worcester State.
Yep.
Interesting.
That must be like a 2-year school in there.
No idea. I just received all the paperwork with the tuition bill. It said Worcester State, and I was like, oh, okay. Different address than,
Not Worcester Polytech.
no, it's not Worcester Polytech, no.
And not Holy Cross.
Yeah,
No.
or Clark.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Tom, do you want to look at them real quick, or?
So are these the second semester or the first
Yeah,
semester?
they didn't come in for the first semester, so they asked if they could come in for the second semester. I guess they needed funding more in the second semester.
Okay, anything else that,
Nope, that's it.
all right, let's invite our guests in. We seem
You want me to
have
go get them?
a light that's out, is that a?
That might be behind you, Tom.
What is that in the case?
That's the world-famous anchor. I
Is that to keep us anchored in our
could be.
efforts? Good morning again.
Good morning. How are you?
You recovered from your big event?
Oh, it was very good. I thought it went well.
It did. Suzanne and I were at a meeting together a couple days ago.
Down in D.C. or?
DC.
He was surprised to see me.
I was.
You're in my hood now.
Absolutely. Hay Adams, right?
Oh, nice.
Hay Adams,
I like that.
iconic hotel on the top floor. The view. It was a spectacular evening overlooking the White House and the Washington.
I already got it.
You got it, okay.
It was amazing. Thank you. You printed the whole thing out?
I did. I wanted to read it before the meeting.
I haven't been in the upstairs at the Haddam, but I spent a little time down in the basement.
In the basement? Yeah. Is that where the bar is?
That's where the bar
Did you
is.
bring home the coasters?
What did I?
So the coasters, they change them out every couple weeks or so to be current with political times. They already have a coaster for the total cluster that is the Republican Party and their attempt to elect a new speaker.
I'm not kidding.
So, but the coasters, the decorations in it's called Off the Record, because a lot of the press corps come across the street and they have a beverage at the end of the day, and it's all caricatures of political folks, and then the coasters are the caricatures also, and they'll change according to what's
The
going on.
political wins of the
Yes.
day?
Yes,
And you can collect them?
yes, they know people will take them.
Yes.
So.
Do you have a collection?
Oh, yes. I had it. Well, so after the event, I took one of our clients downstairs.
Oh.
And I said, I have to get a new Biden because the dog ate Biden. And so so I had to get a new Joe Biden. And so, but.
I didn't rate a trip down to the
Oh, you
basement for
disappeared.
coasters.
You disappeared.
They shepherded us off into the bus.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to hang with
All
me.
right,
I
all right,
hang with
next
the cool
trip.
kids.
You're getting coasters.
All right. We will turn the floor over to you to
Okay.
walk us through this, and then we have some questions and things
Sounds
to kick
great.
around.
I thought I'd start with the dashboard, and maybe just first take the opportunity to ask, format-wise, have we gotten this to a point that we like? Are there additional changes that you want to make? As you look across the top, you'll see you're getting period end, month end values for the four portfolios, year-to-date performance versus your benchmark, and then monthly performance with graphs down below. We can obviously continue to edit it going forward, but if there's any other changes you want to make, please let us know. In looking at these balances, yeah, good.
I think we're good.
And then I'll show you the quarterly figures in the larger deck. But this is a good place to start because as you know, the four portfolios are identically managed. The investment model's the same, so it's kind of handy to see them all on one page here. You'll see the balances in the second column. If you go to the third column from the left, you'll see year-to-date performance. The differences that you see across the four portfolios, ranging from 789 to 810, is just a function of them rebalancing during the quarter on different days.
You say year-to-date, are we on a calendar year or a fiscal year?
That statistic is calendar.
Okay.
As is
Yeah, go ahead. As is what?
the benchmark to the right of it, the investment policy benchmark. Those are aligned to calendar year to date.
But-
Would you
and-
prefer to
and-
see it as fiscal year to date?
No, well, up above.
It says fiscal year
It
above.
says fiscal year.
Oh, that's got to be a typo because I haven't been giving you fiscal year.
No, I think I'll talk to Skylar about that. We'll fix that.
Okay, good catch. Okay.
All right. No, calendar year's good.
Calendar year is good. Okay. You got that one, Suzanne?
Yep.
Good
Yeah.
question.
Great. You'll notice meaningful outperformance year-to-date to the investment policy benchmark. And the reasons for that are they're both 75% equity, 25% fixed income portfolios at the aggregate level. So the outperformance is just a function of tactical weightings within the current investment. So for example, we have 0 weighting to REITs currently. The policy's got a 5% allocation to REITs. REITs have struggled, when you think about the commercial real estate market, companies still struggling to get employees back to work 5 days a week, et cetera. The online shopping malls, et cetera, et cetera. Commercial real estate's been challenged. So that 5%, REITs have been the worst performing asset class year to date, minus 2%. So having 0 in REITs has helped. We've got 5% in international markets, developed international markets, versus 10% in the policy. So you've essentially got more U.S. stocks than international versus your policy. And the S&P 500's done about 6% better year to date than international stocks. So that has helped. We've got a tactical weighting to U.S. large value stocks. Think of dividend-paying stocks. That's kind of a wash because we've also got a little bit of emerging markets in the portfolio versus 0 in the IPS. So that's kind of a wash. And then lastly, your exposure to high yield, it's small. We only have 2% in high yield in the portfolio, high yield fixed income, but it's been by far the best performing fixed income market year to date. It's up 4% versus negative 1% for the broad fixed income market. So that's why you see that beneficial, outperformance versus your policy benchmark. For the month of September, you'll notice all the portfolios were down just about 3.9%, pretty much in line with your benchmark, a little bit better. In this case, the 10% allocation that we have to U.S. large value was about 100 basis points better than the S&P 500. So that really, for the first time all year, started to provide a benefit. And just while we're looking at this September performance for the quarter, and I'll show you this in a minute, the portfolios were down about 3%. So the third quarter this year was rough for both stocks and bonds. Basically everything was down 3%, and you'll see that reflected in the portfolios. Any questions on the dashboard?
Yeah,
Yep.
big improvement.
It'll come faster now that the template has been blessed by compliance.
They don't have to bless it every month?
No. Now that the format is
The
all
blessing
agreed
has been
upon, we can
performed.
just fill in the numbers.
So I assume we'll still always have to get page 2.
Yes, we will. Just
Can I ask a question
Absolutely.
of you guys? How do you feel, any interest in requesting in aggregate at the bottom, where we have a total of 21,183, having aggregate performance year-to-date across, or just
Just-
individual funds?
Are you suggesting a weighted average of the
Well,
individual
yeah.
performances?
Yeah.
I would I think that compliance will reject our ability to offer you that for the simple reason that it doesn't go through our performance engine, and reporting on performance is one of their, we just don't want to get hung up regulatorily on how we provide those numbers. These numbers come out of a vetted system of time-weighted return. So a simple calculation like that, they will probably reject. However, what I might be able to do is, looking at the numbers, right, we pretty much know it's
Yeah,
going to
right,
be 7.9, probably 7.95%. You know what I'll try to do is see if I can align the monthly rebalances. Because the reason you see differences there is just because of when we set these funds up, they didn't all get invested at the same time, and the system sets its quarterly rebalancing on that initial investment. If I can drive them all to the same rebalancing date each quarter, those numbers should be, maybe a basis point
Yeah,
off.
no, no need fighting compliance. It's fine.
Yep.
We'll just get a third page.
Yeah.
Of legal disclaimers.
All disclaimers, right. Yep. Okay.
But this is a good page.
Good. Okay, so jumping to the main deck.
Yeah, just as we're looking at this,
Yep.
your prediction for the fourth quarter.
It depends if the world blows up.
Yeah, I was going to
The
say right now it
TD
was.
prediction, which is what I should provide you, we don't have a third quarter prediction, but we do expect fixed income to outperform.
Fourth quarter.
Did I say third?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, sorry, I got third quarter on my brain. TD does not put out a quarterly forecast, and we don't even really put out stringent longer-term forecasts. We kind of rely on the capital market assumptions that are in our models, which are much more longer-term focused, like 10 years, which generally aligns with the investment horizons of our clients. We do expect, and I'll show you this, I think it's the last page of the deck, bonds to outperform stocks over the next year.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's based on our rate view that interest rates stop going up and fixed income gets you a 4.5% to 5.5% return over the next 12 months. So what we're really saying is we think stocks are going to struggle to do better than that.
But they're not going to go down either.
We don't get that specific. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's
So we're calling for, you're taking all my thunder. We are not forecasting a recession, but there's a quote in the deck you may have seen that it's a really close call. We and virtually every other major economic shop have been surprised at the resilience of the economy thus far this year, including the third quarter GDP print was quite strong. We expect the fourth quarter to barely be positive, the first quarter of 2024 to barely be positive, and that's where you get into the, are we going into a recession? But we're not calling for that yet. So that would, where we're less constructive on equities over the next 12 months is the thinking that what's mostly been driving this market higher has been 7 stocks that the world is absolutely in love with. We have started to see some cracks in, and this is all about, these companies are extremely profitable. It's all about how much are investors willing to pay for those earnings.
Yeah.
And that's where we've started to see the market come off a little bit.
well, and of course, with the yield on treasuries going up, people are,
There is an alternative,
Yeah.
right? The acronym was TINA. There is no alternative when interest rates were rounded to zero.
yeah.
This is true. Okay, so with that, and we've covered a lot of good points so far. If I can ask you to look at page 4, and you'll see the page number on the bottom of the page. This is an overview of the scholarship fund. And you can see scholarship up in the upper left here. All the portfolios are identical. So what I really want to walk you through here is if you look at the right side of the page, the asset allocation table and chart, again, 75% equities, 25% fixed income, and that's 23% bonds, 2% cash. As you look on the far right down that table, you see a more detailed allocation across the asset classes. So within U.S. large cap, you've got 50% allocated to large cap core. That's the S&P 500. We've got a 10% tactical allocation to U.S. large value dividend stocks. 5% to small and mid cap, 5% to international, and then you get the fixed income components. You see that other fixed income is your 2 high yield holdings. One is a bank loan product. Those are floating rate high yield debt products, and then the high yield bucket is all fixed rate below investment grade. And then you get 3 intermediate bond strategies, and that 16%, 1 short bond strategy, and cash. You talked a little bit about how these allocations have kind of benefited performance year to date and in the third quarter. You're highly diversified, right? Within both the S&P 500 and the 10% allocation to large value, you've got exposure to hundreds of underlying stocks. We're not taking any big bets on the direction of interest rates or any specific markets. And as I said previously, the tactical weightings have been beneficial to performance relative to your policy benchmark. I'm not recommending any changes at this time. Your portfolio is actually quite consistent with TD's thinking for a long-term perspective, which is, because we're a little anxious about what growth is going to be for the next few quarters, we're asking for a quality emphasis in portfolios. While you have exposure to high yield bonds, it's 2%. It's been marginally it's been your best performing bond portfolios year to date, but at 2%, it's given you a marginal benefit. If corporate bond spreads were to widen dramatically in an economic slowdown, you would not be dramatically hurt by that, and it's entirely possible that high yield would continue to still outperform because the coupon rates are so high. We prefer government bonds over investment grade. You've got that weighting within your portfolio. I'll show you the detail in a second. So we're not recommending any changes, but I wanted to pause here based on a conversation that Judy and I had the other day about your overall asset allocation and whether you're bumping into constraints with regards to your 75% allocation to equities. Is this a good time to have that discussion?
Sure. So part of this is driven by, last couple months, we made our filings with the state of New Hampshire. They're reviewed by the Department of Justice auditors, if you will, and they've accepted our filings. But in the course of doing that, I had a conversation with the auditor about our investment policy, and there's a sort of a procedural thing. You may recall from your review of our investment policy, we will say, for instance, that we will meet with you quarterly, while we're only doing it semi-annually. So she was raising whether we're complying with our own policy. But put that aside for a minute. Apparently, there is no hard and fast rule of what percentage of equity versus income you would have before you went beyond the reasonably prudent investor standard. But she was saying that most of the cities and towns they see have a 70% cap on equity. And so one of the questions I had would be, if we were to change our policy to 70%, what would that do to our performance?
Yep. Not a lot is the short answer. I wouldn't overthink this. Over long periods of time, you would expect equities to do better than fixed income. And so over long periods of time, that 5% reduction in equities would most likely have a negative impact on, the performance of the portfolio. Over the next 12 months, if TD's forecast is correct, it would benefit the performance of the portfolio if bonds outperform stocks. I would not... I'm personally, as a shop, in terms of the risk profile and how we model our assumptions around asset classes, it's a pretty small difference. 5% change is pretty small. You would expect it to, again, hurt performance over, a perpetual time horizon because we expect stocks to grow and bonds to basically just keep pace with inflation. But in any given short-term performance period, we can't precisely predict that. Does that make sense?
What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. Over the past, certainly 10 years, it's benefited us tremendous, more than just a little bit, I would think. But my question is, that would be a cap in the investment policy, 75%. So tactically, you don't have to go to the cap of 75%. For example, in the next 12 months, potentially the tactical adjustments in the portfolio would weight a little bit favorably to bonds. Would that be a correct assumption?
It is, and I would also say that we can take your equity exposure down. I'm kind of saying the same thing slightly differently. We could take your equity exposure down 5%. You wouldn't need to make any changes to the investment portfolio.
Well, and that's what that was going to be. I don't think we're prepared to change the investment policy right now, just
I
on
meant
a-
policy, I
but-
said portfolio, yep.
Yeah.
Particularly given your predictions, I'm inclined to think that we ought to just have you take it down to 70%. And, we'll look at the policy over the next 6 months or something and decide whether we want to, etch that in stone. And your sense, at least for the next probably year, is that we will not suffer a difference in performance because of your predictions of the market.
Yeah, based on TD's view, it may actually benefit you. Yep.
I would maybe push back a little bit, not that you want to get in trouble with the auditors, but not all towns are the same.
Well, that was going to be my question, Tom. Who's to say that this person you talk to says that most towns are 70%? That doesn't make them right and us wrong.
Absolutely. So the conversation.
So who's this person? Just because some of our other towns are doing it, for them to say, well, you ought to be doing it too. I mean, I think the track record of
Yeah,
the
let her measure
performance.
performance of our,
Yeah,
Over the
I mean,
last
that'd be one thing if our performance over the years had not been well done or well managed, but just because this person says, well, other towns are doing that, I would like to have them come and tell us so we can have discussions.
She said she would.
Yeah.
She said she'd be happy to come talk.
Yeah, I mean, to have this, without the benefit of being able to question her, just by a telephone call, I'm not in a position. I want to make a change just because they said that other towns are doing it differently.
And I understand that, and I'm not defending their position, because she made it clear to me that they don't have a hard and fast rule. They don't have anything that says that trustees throughout the state of New Hampshire should not exceed the 70% equity position. I'm suggesting that, because of what John is saying here this morning, that we ought to reduce our equity position, even if it's just for the next 6 months, to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
And I think what the message, and I think from my understanding is that there are a lot of new people in this division at the state. I think, we've never had the scrutiny with our MS report.
We had much harder scrutiny this time around. I mean,
Yeah.
they've always looked at it, but they came back, different group.
Yeah, let me just say, so I think part of, I think it may be part of it, the new people are trying to get a grasp on what's going on and tighten things. The comment she said to me is the 75% was a red flag to them. So I'm just,
I would like to request, before we have a formal vote to change our investment policy, that we request that they come meet with us to give us their thoughts in person.
I totally agree with that.
But we're not even going down that road. at
Yeah, we're
this
not,
point.
I'm not proposing we change the policy right now.
But what I'm saying is, before we do that, we want to hear from them directly.
Right, before any changes were to be addressed with the investment policy, you would like the AG's office to come in to speak with the trustees in person.
Explain to us why they think that we're not being correct.
Yeah, not about what being correct or not, it's just, they're not telling me that we're not doing our prudent investor requirements. They're simply saying we're an outlier.
But relative to your thought about over the next midterm period, reducing equity exposures, I'd be curious to get your feedback and Suzanne's on that.
Yeah, so it would be rare. The tactical adjustments that we will recommend will almost always be within asset classes as opposed to changing the overall asset allocation between bonds and stocks. So for example, right now, the 10% allocation that we have to value and dividend, right? We're not changing
I see.
the overall equity allocation, it's just within equities, right? And that's because you're in a risk objective that, again, is for a time horizon significantly longer than 6 months or the next 12 months. And we know neither TD nor anybody else can predict markets over, any short-term period of time. And we know that over long periods of time, stocks,
So
tend to
would
outperform the
you
economy.
say it would be within your mandate to respond to a request such as this to reduce equity exposure without a policy change?
Say that
Within
again?
the cap, I guess, are you at liberty to change the allocation between equities and bonds by just adjusting the cap, by reducing the exposure?
Yeah, because we have a
range.
strategic target.
Yeah.
And then we have a range beyond that.
Okay.
So I have to go back and pull the policy to look at specific
I
numbers.
have the data here. You're within the policy, without changing the policy in
Right.
any way, you could take equities down to 50%.
Okay. So who makes that decision?
Technically,
TD has the discretionary authority to work within the constraints of the policy. But it would be rare, so we can do that.
Okay.
But in the context of our thoughts on the markets and making tactical changes, it would be rare to deviate from, not unprecedented and not inappropriate, just it would be rare for me to come into you on a quarter and say, hey, we cut equities from 75 to 50,
Yeah.
especially without a discussion. As opposed to me
where-
coming in and saying, hey, this quarter we're overweighting U.S. growth stocks, but we took it away from.
Where I'm going with this is I want to be careful that we as trustees, we're hiring professional managers. I don't want to become a manager of the portfolio or the allocations without direction or blessing or advisement from the managers.
And that's why we hire the manager.
Yeah.
No, I totally get that.
And-
And so what I hear you saying, John, is that if we weren't having this conversation, you wouldn't consider there'd be any reason to start shifting around that breakdown.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But having had the conversation, what's your thought on doing it at this point?
I'm agnostic in the sense that on the plus side, it's consistent with TD. It wouldn't be inconsistent with TD's view to dial back the equity exposure a little bit, but a 5% difference is, we're not gonna hit a grand slam if, the stock market continues to roar ahead, and we're not going to suffer immeasurable loss in performance if the stock market tanks. 5% is just not a big enough change, right, to meaningfully move the ship one way or the other. So I would support the reduction, and if TD was saying we hate bonds now and we love stocks, I'd feel differently about it. But I definitely don't make decisions in my clients' portfolios on TD's short-term thinking about the markets, because we do not have a crystal ball. Nobody does. The market has, if TD was very cautious about equities going into this year. And, the S&P 500 was up over 16% going into the second quarter. So it would have been it would have hurt performance this year, right? Your year-to-date performance of roughly 8% is entirely equities. So, but had we dialed that back 5%, your performance, instead of 8%, it would be 7.7% maybe.
You were going to push back on that?
No, the point I was going to say about pushing back against the AG is that your portfolios are more growth-oriented. You need to generate growth because you have scholarship funds you need to support. And the park has programmatic needs that need to be funded, and you have a housing entity that needs funding. That needs growth. Other towns have cemeteries, and they need to pay the landscaping fees. That's more of an income-driven type of thing. So where this may have been a flag, not all portfolios are the same. So the purpose of the portfolio and the reason for the asset allocation is going to be different. So comparing one town or one portfolio against another and what the asset allocation assigned to it is not fair.
Totally agree with you. And I'm only raising this question because it was suggested to me that we were a real outlier. So across the board. She didn't say you're the only person or the only municipality having above 70%, but the fact that it was a red flag suggested that we're at a minimum in a real clear minority. But
We're probably an outlier on positive performance, too.
The other thing that you have to take into consideration is when the MS-10 was filed, the scholarship fund was at 77% at that time, because they had just gotten the influx of the $1 million from Warner.
Yeah, good
So
point.
pushed it over. I did raise that point with her, and she went, "Oh, well, yeah, but did they take a vote on that? Did they do this? Did they do that?" And that's when I was like,
Yeah, good point.
so, and that's when she said, "I will pass we will accept the MS-10." But it was the endowment fund, which was McCann getting the extra money in, and the scholarship fund. And those were the two that were slightly above the 75%. I think that if we had come in honestly, she might have been like, ooh, you got 75 cents and you're just under it, but I don't think it would have done quite what it did because we had two over.
That was the Mortimer bonus.
Do they?
Mortimer
I also
bonus.
wonder too, most of the trustee of trust fund accounts that I work with in New Hampshire have a fund dedicated to cap reserves, which we're not managing here, and cap reserves are almost always all fixed income, if not cash. In many cases, it's a bank product, it's a deposit product. When interest rates were really, really low, I had clients looking to get into bonds as opposed to just bank deposits. But I wonder if most of the trust fund clients have a portfolio dedicated to cap reserve, so that may be skewing their thinking as well.
But the AG's office wouldn't be reviewing cap reserve accounts, because those are up to municipalities. They just look at things, so cap reserves are not put in the hands of trustees, as I understand it. Because that's a city budgeting issue.
Yeah, no, that would be inconsistent with, I'm trying to think.
It doesn't get in the, it
It's
doesn't
not-
go in the MS9 and MS10, but other clients of ours, the trustees will look at both.
Okay, well, we've never looked at that,
Exactly,
so.
yeah. Maybe
okay.
it's half the portfolios.
Right.
Yeah.
Who manages cap reserves for us?
I would imagine Judy Belanger.
Judy,
Yeah.
yeah.
The finance department.
Yeah.
Yeah, TD should be talking to her about managing that.
Thank you.
You could retire, John.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think there's a consensus that we don't want to change the policy right now, and I think we do need, if we want to even think about it, we got to bring in some of the AGs. I'd want to do some polling with other larger places like Nashua, Manchester, Concord as to what their standards are before we did anything. The question is whether we want to ask John to dial down the allocation.
I don't think we do. I want the recommendation to come from him, as opposed to some bureaucrat in Concord that, do they have a financial advisor that's advising them? That's why we hire a financial advisor, and we're paying for it. I'm going to listen to them rather than listen to somebody who doesn't have the total knowledge of what's going on.
So with the MS10, at the end of the quarter, you got cash donations and that caused the,
That's what it certainly looks like to me, and when I said that to her, she went, oh, yeah. I said, if you look, I said, see, there's a contribution coming in, the capital contribution on the line, that's like $1 million. I said that, obviously, I said, and it may be a dumb question, I said to her, I said, but wouldn't that money come in, it would temporarily skew it while the portfolio rebalances, which is exactly what it did, because the next month, everything's back under the 75%. And she said, yep, it could. And then she started in, she said, my job is just making sure that the policy's being followed, and then she brought up the meeting thing, and that's when I said, okay. I said, well, where are we with the MS10? Because I need that to be filed. And she said, I'm going to accept it, because she said it does look like it could be a one-time thing. I mean, she wasn't nasty in any way, shape, or form. She's a CPA, she's doing her job. So it was just kind of walking her through the steps of that, where it was, and then having a conversation.
It could be the influx of new money that came in, and I think it was May we handed to you
Right at
over.
the end of May, so it would have skewed that.
So you would have been putting that money to work,
Yeah.
right,
and the market in just 1 month could,
Right.
So it's,
Precisely.
Yeah.
at any, even without that influx, you could have a month in which you ticked above the 75%.
And then it'll rebalance.
Yeah, and then it just rebalances. So I'm not
Yeah.
so much concerned about that, because we don't have if we were, every month we were ticking to 75 to 80 to something like that, that would be a different story, but
Yeah.
I think we're doing a good job of the rebalancing on an ongoing basis. Well, how do you feel about,
I'm agnostic. I
You could leave it for now. I mean,
personally think it would help, but that doesn't make it like, I don't think that's our role, as Peter said. I'd rather just say to John, if the consensus is, if you wanted to make an adjustment, if you felt it appropriate to rebalance a little bit equities to bonds, we would support that. But I don't want to direct you to do it.
okay? I think you get your marching orders.
Yeah, let's go to the other question. If we need to meet with you 4 times a year, can we do 2 by Zoom
Absolutely.
with no increase in the fee?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're doing the, first and third quarters in person. Does that work, or would you rather do the, year end or the
I'll come all 4 quarters in person.
You must have had a good dinner last night.
I told her she should stay around for the parade on Tuesday.
Well, I can't
that's
stay
a
that
good
long, but I am
time.
staying tonight.
All right, okay, so, well, how do you want to meet in person 4 times a year, or would you rather? I know you would, but what would you, John?
Whatever works for everybody.
Whatever's convenient for you all is fine with us.
Okay, all right. So we'll go forward and we'll do it on a quarterly basis, and, sometimes if it's problematic to come in person, just, let us know, and
We'll zoom
we
in.
can do it Zoom.
Sounds good.
if it's snowing, because
Or
you might not like it here so much.
Or he's in lockdown, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, what?
The lockdown.
Yeah.
Lockdown. She's referring to the mass shooting in Lewiston.
It's horrible.
My future daughter-in-law is an emergency doctor at Maine Med. So they had one injured person come.
At Maine Med in Portland?
Portland.
Yeah.
That's,
It's awful.
All right. So are we okay on that, or do you want to go back to the rest of it, or?
I just want to make a few other comments to you, just so you know what's in here. If you turn to page 5, I'm showing you the actual model holdings. So on the left side, you see each of the holdings in the portfolio. In the next column from the left, you see the percentage allocation. So there's there's a good example. If you look at the 55.94%, that's really a 55% target. Based on performance through the quarters, that's going to deviate prior to rebalancing. Most importantly, as I told you, minus 3% for the quarter overall. Value slightly outperformed the S&P 500. If you look at the far right, the top 2 lines, you can see the S&P 500 was down 3.2, large value was down 3. And then with rates up over the quarter, your short duration fixed income products meaningfully beat your long duration. So your best performing product in bonds is 4 rows down. That's the bank loan product. Those are below investment grade borrowers, but on a floating rate basis. So they're really insensitive to the increase in interest rates, and they also have really nice spreads. And then third from the bottom, your shortest bond portfolio was also slightly positive at 0.6. So
John, can I ask a question? I'm trying to understand this page. On the left, these are the benchmarks. Is that correct?
no, those are the actual holdings. So
Okay.
your
All right.
S&P 500 fund is the Fidelity 500 index fund. It doesn't put the ticker on there, but that's your actual holding. The second one is we have a 10% allocation to Vanguard's Russell 1000 Value
Okay.
ETF.
And on the right, large cap core,
That's a style name, so that's kind of showing you, like, the second one is in the large value dividend bucket. Large cap core is the S&P 500.
Okay, so when, at the top, it says the component and then the benchmarks.
It actually isn't showing any benchmarks on this page.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
why I was
yeah.
confused. Right.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. But if you turn to the next page, so that's the portfolio detail, which is, again, identical for all 4 portfolios. And then this table is showing you performance going all the way back to inception. And so the far left shows you the performance period. So at the very top, you've got the third quarter of 2023. Middle column, TWRR, is time-weighted rate of return net of fees. So that's the -3% that I mentioned. And then you can actually see comparison to 2 benchmarks. The manager benchmark is a system default benchmark. I don't pay any attention to it, but we have recreated your policy benchmark, and so that's what we're comparing on your dashboard. And consistent with everything I've said prior to that, as I look, either the last quarter, or if you look at the bottom 3 rows, year to date, the 792 I mentioned, the trailing 1 year, the custom period is since inception. We're almost 2.5 years now. I wish our nominal performance since inception was positive. It's interesting, the inception date for this portfolio in late May of 2021 was, right before calendar year 2022, which was the worst fixed income year we've seen in over 200 years by some measures. But the tactical weightings that we've made have added value. The performance relative to your benchmark is strong, so I'm happy with relative performance. And that was all my comments on the portfolios. And if you'd like, I'll just take a couple minutes and go through the deck that starts on page 14. And I'll go through this quickly for you. If you turn to page 15, you've seen this graph before. I'll give you a second to get there. Yeah, next page, baby. So this is showing you asset class returns, fixed income on top, equities in the middle. And, this was kind of a -3% quarter, no matter where you look down that. It's the second column from the left, 3-month. You can see on the fixed income side at the top, virtually every category down around 3%. I kind of focus on the second one, which is the U.S. aggregate bond index. There's no high yield in there. You can see high yield at the very bottom row in the fixed income section, as we just talked about. Below that, you see the S&P 500 -3.2. As I said, right below that, or a couple rows below that, you see the growth index, the Russell 1000 growth, and then the Russell 1000 value, everything down 3%. What's notable is, as I mentioned earlier, this is the first quarter we've seen in a while where that obsession with the Amazons and the NVIDIAs and the Googles and the Apples and the Teslas has started to change. If you go one column to the right, so this is the year-to-date column, and I'm asking you to look in the equity section at the second or the third and fourth rows. Year-to-date growth massively outperformed value. The third quarter is the first time where they were basically even. And what TD is concerned about with the equity market is the market just reevaluating how much they're willing to pay for the earnings of those companies. They're rather expensive by historic standards. It's precisely why we want you to be as diversified as possible. If you go ahead 2 pages, this emphasizes the diversification argument. This is showing you, on the left-hand side, you see the way we divide the U.S. economy into sectors. So you got the energy sector, communication services, financials, et cetera. That's how we kind of think about categorizing the U.S. economy. And then the table is showing you green is the second quarter performance and blue is the third quarter performance. And you'll notice, energy was one of the 2 laggards in the second quarter, and by far the best performer in the third quarter. Conversely, if you look 4 rows from the bottom, Infotech was the leader in the second quarter, by far, up 17%, and the third worst or fourth worst in the third quarter at -5.6%. So this is why when I say to you earlier, I want you to have exposure across all these sectors. We're not making any bets on any one sector in the portfolio. I wish we had the ability to do that, but we don't. And so it's about giving you a diversified portfolio across all of these six sectors without taking any undue risk in any one. Year to date, we would have been better off if everything was in the NASDAQ 100, but you'd have a 40% allocation to those 7 stocks, which would be taking way too much risk with this portfolio. So that's why we've got you diversified. If you look at next page 18, I just want you to notice the green line, which is the nominal 10-year U.S. Treasury yield. The 10-year was up 76 basis points in the third quarter. That is and it's just kind of the far right of that green line that you see. A couple things going on here. The market seems to be accepting the higher for longer mantra that the Fed has been talking about since they started raising interest rates. As you know, the yield curve was inverted, meaning longer-term rates were below short-term rates, and it's still inverted, but significantly less so as a result of this move. It's part of the reason we're constructive on fixed income over the next 12 months. If our forecast is right and rates stop going up, you should see 4 to 5% returns on your bond holdings, which is hundreds of basis points higher than we've been able to earn on bonds since the mid-2000s. We haven't seen rates like this since 2007. And then secondly, part of this move appears to be the Chinese government has been selling some of their U.S. Treasury holdings. They're trying to prop up their own currency. And so it's there's an old joke, why is the market up today? More buyers than sellers. Why is the market down today? More sellers than buyers, right? That will always be true. Nobody has great transparent visibility to those individual transactions, but supply and demand will always drive prices, and we know that the Chinese have been selling. They had held as much as $3 trillion in U.S. government securities. I think it's closer to 2.2 now, so meaningful. Just a couple other pages I wanted to mention. If you jump ahead to page 20, this is a quote from our latest economics forecast. I'll just read it quickly for you. Recession calls have been pared back in recent months as advanced economies weather the substantial monetary tightening of the past 18 months better than many forecasters feared. I would say better than every forecaster feared. Hopes that the Federal Reserve will pull off a soft landing have increased, with markets building in expectations for interest rates remaining higher for longer, but now comes the hard part, which is actually pulling it off. And if you go to page 21, the green line is TD's index of leading economic indicators. And it has gone below a line that historically has coincided with recessions. However, we continue to not call for one. We recognize that there are significant lags between the Fed raising interest rates and it filtering through the economy, and this economy has just been extraordinarily resilient. But the point is, it's a close call.
So wait, this green line indicates a recession, but you're not calling for one.
No, the gray bars indicate recessions. The green line, I'll just read you the salient section here. It's on the right. The TD Leading Economic Index is comprised of 8 economic indicators. Readings of 0 are consistent with the historical average. Points in the business cycle. Shaded areas represent a recession. We are periods below the 0.4 standard deviation bound have typically been a warning of slower economic activity. So slower economic activity does not necessarily mean negative performance. And it's kind of hedging our bet, like, we know this isn't a perfect indicator, but that spike, if you look at the green line on the far right, that spike up to, call it 5, was the benefits to the economy from the trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions, I think it was 6 trillion, of stimulus that we saw during COVID, right? And we're coming off that now. So the question is, where do we land? I'll show you our actual forecast for GDP in a second. But all that in, page 22 is kind of telling you how we're thinking about specific asset allocation positioning as a result of this. And if you just look at the 2 columns on the right, the very bottom, as a result of everything I've shared with you, we're emphasizing on fixed income, higher quality liquid, so treasuries, agency MBS, investment grade over corporates. All of this is already reflected in your current portfolio based on the allocations that I shared with you. And then on the bottom right, modest preference for U.S. over international stocks and companies with defensive traits. Similarly, you have that reflected in your portfolio today. We're underweight international relative to your benchmarks, and we've got a slight overweight to U.S. value. And then just lastly, page 23 shows you our forecasts. So just a couple things I wanted to point out to you on this page. The table on the top, the very top row, is the U.S. Fed funds rate. So this is the one interest rate that the Fed actually controls. We are at 5.5 now. TD's actually got one more tightening built into this forecast. I think we put in there what the Fed has been saying they're going to do. I'll take the under on that. I think the Fed is done. There's no prize if I'm right, but we'll see.
The booby prize.
What's that? A booby prize? Yeah. The Fed has acknowledged that if you think about the 10-year Treasury yield I just showed you and a nearly 80 basis point increase, that is like a tightening, right? That directly affects mortgage rate. It directly affects long-term corporate borrowing rates. So it's like a tightening, and so it's highly possible that the Fed looks at that and says, yeah, we're good. That said, we've got one tightening in the fourth quarter priced in, but if you go 4 columns to the right, Q4 2024, we see them easing down to 4.5 by the end of next year. And that is a function of, if you go to the table at the bottom, the top row is our GDP forecast. So our forecast for the third quarter, we just got the preliminary number, was closer to 4%. So we were pretty close on that, but you can see a dramatic slowdown that we see through the next 3 quarters before picking up in late 2024. So if those go slightly negative, you're going to get into that soft landing, slight recession scenario. You can think of it simplistically as a function of just all that stimulus spending finally coming off, having worked its way through the economy. And then lastly, TD hasn't talked about this in depth, but the U.S. government budget deficit is, it's over $1.5 trillion a year, right? So that alone is contributing over 1% to economic growth every year, right? That's the positive, right? The negative is how do we ever pay this off? But that similarly could keep us in positive territory.
You're predicting unemployment to rise.
That is in the second row from the bottom.
Yeah.
And you can see us taking it from, call it 3.5 today, up perhaps as much as 1% by the end of next year.
Yeah.
Now, 4.5% would still be below what the Fed models say is the long-term unemployment rate. Nobody ever thought we could get to unemployment that low without significant consequences for the economy in terms of inflation, in the context that, right, everybody's got a job, employers can't find workers can demand higher rate wages, and that flows through to inflation. We just haven't seen that play out. And then inflation's the very bottom row, and you got to go all the way over to 2025 before we forecast the Fed getting back to their 2% target. So thank you for allowing me to walk you through all that.
It's a good report.
Very good report.
Yeah, very good.
And thank you for your
Some
time
good
as
charts.
always.
Yeah.
Yep. And should you have any conversations, I guess I'll just conclude with, should you have any conversations with the auditors or with the state and you decide you want to do anything different, it's a phone call to me and extremely easy to
We're
change
not
the
going to have
asset
any more
allocation, so.
conversation with the state until they come and talk to us in
Yep,
person.
understood.
So
Do both
can
of
I
you
be
just manage institutional
We're
nonprofits?
leaving things as is?
Institutional,
So I can note it in the
yes,
meeting.
not necessarily nonprofit.
Okay.
Because
I'm
Same-
only
it's a copy.
nonprofit.
You're only
So-
nonprofit.
My role changed. I only have a couple of clients as a relationship manager. I'm considered the subject matter specialist for nonprofits, and I cover the entire footprint for TD.
Oh, for nonprofits?
So I was allowed to keep a couple of clients, and I only kept the ones I liked.
Places you want to go?
So you met a couple of them the other night, and then you all, and so there's about 10 clients. And then as we bring on some of the ones that need a little more care and feeding, I'll keep those. But I'll be working with our relationship managers throughout the footprint to help them as
What
they
was the
bring
name
on new
of
business.
the nonprofit does a lot of the housing, Bridges? Do you know?
Oh, Versan, yes. Bridges across the river.
No,
He's-
there was another one. Maybe it was, and anyway, the reason I bring it up is she deals with a lot of housing, nonprofit, development, and might be a good contact for the city with all the, low-income housing or affordable housing we're trying to do.
Well, so I'm
have
on
a
the
lot of
board of an
developers.
organization called Wesley Housing. We have 26 buildings, which is actually 30 communities, but 26 buildings. And some are dedicated to seniors, some special needs, others are just regular low-income families, 3,000 families. So that's one. Marta Gray was there from Culpeper Garden. They're specifically for seniors. And then Charlie Mang was there. He's Arlington Food Assistance Center. He's trying to address food insecurity. He's feeding 3,500 families a week in Arlington County, Virginia. But Rasan, he was not doing affordable housing. He's Bridges Across the River, which is also known as the ARC, which is Town Hall Education and Arts Recreation Center. The way I know him is one of my best friends worked there and was on the board. She was chair of development there. They started something in Anacostia, which is an area of DC, which is very, very, like, the old joke, roll up the windows, lock the doors, like drive real fast through the neighborhood. But they realized, these kids didn't have anything to do after school, and then they would just find trouble. So the ARC is a place where these kids couldn't get ballet lessons and stuff. Their parents weren't going to drive them to fancy neighborhoods to get ballet lessons, so they figured we'll bring the teachers there. So they built this whole complex, and now it's almost like a grocery store for all the social services that you would need. Like, it's all in one place. It keeps the kids active during the day when there's no one at home. But now there's places to get food when you don't have access to it, and all kinds of, there's amazing programs and things like that for that. But
That was great.
he was in the bright green velvet jacket. That was Rasan.
I missed that. But affordable housing, and TD does a lot of funding of affordable housing. Anyway, something we might want to connect the city to.
Yeah, Housing for Everyone grant is the big grant that TD does for the affordable housing.
If you can find us some land, that would really help.
That I can't come up with. You have to go up. Let's go up.
But,
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Safe travels back.
Thank you.
Have a nice dinner in Portsmouth tonight.
Thank you.
Great to see you all.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Have a good day.
All right, anything else?
Not for me.
Okay. Anything else, gentlemen? No public.
I move we adjourn.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.